Welcome, everyone, to our fall book club program. We're really excited to have you all here for this collaboration between the Teaching and Learning Collaborative and the Success Studio. Thanks so much to Tom Batcho of the Success Studio for your partnership in this program and co-hosting, and of course to our fabulous panel of four Wentworth student peer tutors. It's really a delight to have you all here. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you all. Let me just turn the floor over to Tom to briefly tell us a little bit about the Success Studio and how tutoring works there, just to set the stage for what we'll hear from our student panel in a moment.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Josh and I talked about this, and we thought, thinking about kind of, the nature of like student learning today, as faculty and staff, right? Like we kind of know what it was like when we were going through college, and we know it from like the faculty and staff perspective, and we provided, some of that perspective in the readings, but I thought it would be really interesting to get like the tutor's perspective, the peer tutor's perspective as both students and also tutors. They kind of have, a foot in both worlds. And so I think it can be really interesting to, just hear some of their insights about, what it's like to be a student today with, kind of post-pandemic, with the advent of like AI and just all these different things, right? I thought it'd be helpful just to provide some context about how the tutoring program works here. Some of you may be more or less familiar with it. Um, but in the Success Studio, each semester, each spring and fall, we'll typically have about 70 peer tutors, as well as several professional tutors. There's two main types that we run. So one is appointment-based tutoring. This will typically be about 40 to 45 peer tutors. Each of them will set up availability throughout the week, where they list different courses or skills that they can tutor, and students book them for 30 or 60-minute appointments in a specific course. Most will do maybe 3 or 4 or 5 different courses. We try to cover as many of the first year courses as possible, especially as well as, you know, um, as many of the upper level ones as we can. Typically, we'll cover about 70 to 80 different courses over the course of the semester. Um, the other type is embedded tutoring. This is typically about 25 tutors per semester. These tutors will be assigned to specific sections of, especially courses, occasionally a sophomore course. They join during the class. They're assigned, they're meant to work with a professor to follow their guidance during class about how to enhance student learning in the class, especially with kind of the more active learning activities. And then they run group review sessions outside of class. So some of the ones we have that for are art representation, um, calculus, physics, some of those types of courses. All tutors receive training from me. We follow the college reading and learning guidelines. So the main things to know about just how they're trained are there's a heavy emphasis on building up the students' independence and focusing on learning goals rather than like, the goal shouldn't be like help them finish their homework, right? Help them understand their homework so that, maybe they finish during the session, but if they don't, right, they know how to do it later, right? So there's a heavy emphasis on keeping explanations limited, concise, final, and then as well, a lot on question asking strategies. So each tutor kind of has to find a way to adapt some of those principles to their style, and ask questions in a way that hopefully the student can sort of come to the insight themselves, explain it to themselves effectively. So the tutors can go more into detail about how they apply those broader principles to their own, courses they tutor, how they adapt it to different students. But I just kind of wanted to set that, general outline.
Thank you so much, Tom. And as usual, for the book club programming, I've created a collaborative notes Google Doc. So feel free to click on that. It's in the chat right now. And for those of you watching this on recording, I will share the screen so you can see really briefly what we have. And of course, if you want oops, I think I'm gonna have to reshare. If you want to have access to this, just email us at teach@wit.edu and we'll get you access to that document. Are you all able to see this, what I'm sharing? Can you see this, Tom? Yeah, the collaborative notes document, great. So strategies for meeting the academic needs of today's learners. We have our, one panelist just joined us actually. Could you toss your name in here? our last panelist who joined us. Uh, um, yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble finding your name in the
I
Zoom
mean,
chat right now, given all the different things going on, but just toss your name in there. That'd be awesome to have you in here as well. We have also links to all our source text, our articles, and newsletters from the Chronicle of Higher Education. And if you weren't able to have a look at those, I pulled key quotes from all of those articles, focused on specific instructional strategies that professors from across the country have been implementing in the last couple of years as they have been experimenting with ways to meet today's students where they're at. So feel free to take a look at some of the quotes from different faculty across the country about what they've done in their courses from these three different resources in the Chronicle of Higher Education. And obviously you can do that now or later. If you have a key takeaways from the discussion that you are finding interesting, feel free to add them here. Just write them in, and then any other additional resources that you have come across, you want to add those to our collaborative notes. That would be great. So, thank you very much for your for participating in that. And I will also be putting in. We have 7 questions for our tutors, for our panel of tutors, peer tutors, which we'll lead the program off with. And then after that, we'll open up for discussion. So for our other friends who are joining us from across Wentworth, you'll have a chance to participate, engage, ask questions, or share your thoughts too. So for our first question for our panel of tutors, and Damien, thank you so much. You're the one who I didn't get to meet at our intro meeting. So if you toss your name into that collaborative notes as one of our panelists, that'd be wonderful. Introduce yourself. Your name, major, how long you've been tutoring, what kind of tutoring. Tom was saying there's various types, and in what courses do you tutor? So I'll turn the floor over to, let's start with, we'll go, and just on the order of how you appear on my screen, it's Angela, Marco, Brad, and Damien. So let's go in that order for this question.
Okay, yeah. Hi, I'm Angela. I'm a student in architecture and I just started tutoring this year. I'm teaching structures 1 and 2 and history 1 and 2.
Hi, my name is Marco. I'm a data science major on the 3-year track, and I've been tutoring since high school. Before I went into data science, I was actually considering a career in teaching, but I knew that tutoring was going to be fun regardless. I do one-on-one tutoring, and I mostly tutor like first-year courses and math courses.
Hi everyone, I'm Brad. I am also a data science student. I've tutored since high school as well. I've been tutoring at the Success Studio for about a year and a half now. It's kind of the same thing for me. A lot of the lower level math courses, comp courses, and then some kind of like higher level math, but that's about it.
Hi, my name is Damien. I'm a junior in architecture. I have been tutoring uh, about a year total now. I am an embedded tutor for architecture courses, including architecture media and architecture representation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Tom, do you want to take this next question? I just put it in the chat. And we can go in the same order as well if that works for folks.
Yeah. So for the next question to the tutors, what are some of the most common concerns or issues you find students have when you tutor them? And in turn, like, what are some of your favorite strategies to use when tutoring students to like help them move forward in their learning?
For me, I'd say just overall not understanding concepts in class and then not having the time afterwards to like ask the professor questions. And what I like to do for that is just like go over their notes and then like ask them questions about their understanding and then kind of go like back and forth just to make sure that they know what they're doing. And then also like go through practice questions.
Usually, I encounter students who just write down whatever the professor put for them on the board, but they never really understand what they actually wrote down. So I look at the notes with them, and then I take it on a one-on-one basis, like what part of the notes they did understand, what part of the notes they didn't understand. Usually, when you spell it out for them, it's a lot easier to make it easy for them to understand. And in order to make sure that they know their knowledge, it's easy to find some practice examples that either you make yourself or online. So
Yeah, I think I agree with both those points. I think two other kind of things that I see brought up a lot is one, like specifically clarifying like instructor instructions, whatever the professor um, might assign. Sometimes it's just simply that the students don't really understand what is expected of them, and it's not really a ability that's holding them back. And then another is there are a lot of students, especially in the lower level math classes, that there's a clear kind of lack of fundamentals with a lot of things, which makes kind of understanding more complex problems a lot more difficult. So I think addressing that fundamental level is really key as well. And in terms of kind of the instruction clarification, a lot of the times I'll kind of just clear it up for them. But if it's like a smaller problem, a big thing that helps kind of the student grasp the concepts is having them reframe things in their own words and explain it. Um, but yeah, that's about it for me.
For the courses that I tutor for, it's slightly different compared to just taking tests. So it's a lot of drawing and technical based knowledge, and then knowing how to use computer programs. So the issues that I find the most with students is the instructions aren't always the most clear for how to execute certain commands on a computer. So I try and just get a gauge of what the students know how to do, because there are a lot of ways to execute multiple different things. And then I show them a few other pathways they can use to get to where they need to be, whether it's a drawing technique or some way to use one of the programs that we use.
Thank you so much. And before we move on to our next bigger question, I just want to dive into a couple of things that came up when we talked about this more in depth in our meeting to get ready for this panel. One is, refers to what a few of you were talking about, that sometimes it's not a question of the student's abilities, but it's actually just they come to you with like a lack of clarity of what exactly is expected of them or how to even approach the assignment and break it down. So to bring up the lack of clarity issue first, one thing we talk about is this idea of transparency in teaching and learning, transparency in assignment design. There's a whole framework called TILT, in which the purpose, task, and criteria of the assignment itself are laid out in a bit of a structured way. So how do you think that professors that you're seeing, students come in who are confused, how do you think that faculty could do a better job in terms of making those assignments clearer, more explicit, and more kind of set up to help those students not have those questions, to come into you, be able to do work a bit more independently? And is there any kind of patterns emerging from what you're seeing folks coming into the tutoring center asking about?
Um, I would say that for me at least, a lot of the assignments that students come in with like a clarification issue, it it's very clear that the assignment was either um, has been used before, or it was pulled from another resource, that it wasn't created by the professor, which completely I understand that is a viable way of giving assignments. But I think sometimes it 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 is clear that the instructor might not even realize what a problem um, what they are asking. So I think I don't really know any advice beyond just reviewing the assignments and kind of trying to empathize a little bit of what a student might be looking at and what they may interpret something as. Um, that would probably be my viewpoint on it.
I concur with Brad. It's very apparent that a lot of professors don't they either don't make the assignment, or they just have been using the same one that the faculty is providing without the professor themselves actually knowing what the question specifically is asking. It's a little hard for me as a tutor to have to cross-reference my assignments with theirs, because in some situations it's hard to actually say what the question is asking because it's framed so differently, and a lot of different professors have different expectations. So it's hard to base my own experiences off of what this specific professor wants. So in terms of the assignment not clarity, there are also times where the professor kind of expresses too much information, but in the wrong direction, where they're emphasizing some points that the student doesn't really need. Like they're talking about these points in class and they're saying that these are fundamental principles to whatever they're studying. But in reality, it's not that important for them to know it for the actual assignment. And for a lot of students, it feels like, or at least the ones that I've talked to for tutoring, a lot of them say that they just end up getting kind of confused when the professor ends up like over over complicating some things that if you just took it on a step-by-step basis, it'd be so much easier to understand.
Angela, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Marco and Brad covered it really well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so there was that issue of kind of transparency, and there was also this parallel issue you all were describing that you're seeing as kind of a pain point in the students that are coming to you in the Success Studio of kind of lack of instructional scaffolding, or that there could be more scaffolding built in so that the material isn't necessarily going above students' heads, or it's broken down enough for them to be able to approach it in a way that they can kind of manage on their own. And you're able, obviously, to help out with that as a tutor. But diving into that more deeply in this question, kind of breaks it down a bit more specifically into the way that this professor in the article Declarations of Dependence from the Chronicle of Higher Education describes Professor Anya Gali Robertson, describing her instructional approach that she's come to in the last couple of years. So she breaks down the project into smaller pieces and had them work in groups instead of alone. She coached them along the way, commenting in the Google Doc the group used to collaborate and in class when several groups were struggling. So she reflects, the professor reflected, it was more collaborative and students were less isolated. So what's your take on this example of an assignment redesign to bring in a bit more of that instructional scaffolding, that idea of social constructivism, that your students are making meaning together, that you talked about at the beginning when you're asking them questions to help find the solution? What's your take on that example, and how does it dovetail with both your approach to tutoring and also what you're experiencing in the Wentworth classroom as students?
I think that's like a really great approach to teaching. With the more like group work, the students won't be as like anxious to ask questions, and they also form this sort of community with those people that they're grouped with. So they kind of like have a bit of an incentive or an in to then talk to their peers and ask them questions. And the work with the professor, like themselves, is also very good for just like understanding and like having a conversation.
Yeah, in my opinion, groups are great conceptually, and honestly, it really does depend on what the subject is for what you are collaborating on. But in most cases, I think it's best when professors allow students to partake in three categories. Either they work by themselves, they work with a group that they've chosen, if they have friends in that class, and if they're not really familiar with many people in that class, they're not really comfortable with them, then like it could be taken upon the professor to randomly assign people to groups. I think that works a lot better for collaborative efforts like computer science topics because you're working on some kind of collective project together, and it really does tend to alleviate students and make them feel like that their voice will be heard and their questions will be answered if they are treated like equals to each other. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think uh, also like kind of beyond like the group work part of it, I think like breaking down assignments can be kind of translated to tutoring kind of more directly than group work, especially for me at least because I work with one-on-one tutoring. Um, but like the a lot of the time, basically every tutoring session I have works in that sort of way where the a student will come with a problem or problem set, and they kind of will have no idea where to start. That's kind of I've gotten that so many times of I don't even know where to start. I don't know where to begin. And with just a little bit of guidance of like, all right, well, you know this. and then like yeah, and you kind of start to get the students just going with certain parts of a problem. Within 5 minutes they have the answer and they're like, oh, that's it. So I think breaking down into smaller pieces is really the only way to kind of digest information when you are confused.
Um, I think that definitely the main ideas of working in a group and helping people understand in a group setting is a better way for teaching. With the classes I specifically tutor for, it doesn't really work as well because a lot of it is person by person specific work, but on overall scale. For anything that I have helped teach my friends with, whether it's a math class, um, it is a very effective way to kind of help people go along with learning.
Thank you all so much. Yeah, and something that I'm hearing here is just the need for different instructional strategies to be used. And sometimes that is happening just in the tutoring space. But I think what this professor, Professor Robertson, who is writing in this article, is saying that she was able to find within the context of her course itself moments to move from being kind of that sage on the stage to the guide on the side and be able to kind of offer that individualized coaching and tutoring and supporting students and breaking down where they are offering that personalized instruction within the context of the class itself, which is as she said, a new instructional approach for her that she found is working better, to augment the style of teaching she was doing before COVID and kind of meeting this new generation where they're at, as it were. So speaking of that, kind of, where are you in terms of teaching and learning? What are you seeing? Let's go to our next question. And Tom, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, so for the next question, we wanted to ask, just kind of in general in your own observations, what kinds of classroom activities or, out of class assignments do you find most effective for your own learning? Um, and then as well, like, that's from say like the professor, and then when you're trying to learn that stuff or complete that stuff, what are some of the strategies or resources that you find helpful for your learning? And that could include both like, I don't know, note-taking strategies in class, study strategies outside of class, time management strategies, just anything you use to advance your learning.
For me, it's kind of boring, but going to basics like reading from a, like a textbook, just a few chapters at a time, like kind of splitting it up so it's digestible, and like taking notes and then like jotting on the side any questions that I have to bring to class, is a great strategy for me.
Usually what I tend to do, I cross-reference all of my resources as much as possible, and I try and culminate them into one. And usually what I mean by that is I take whatever the professor specifies will be on whatever assignment I need, or whatever final is going to happen, or whatever project I'm working on, and I take note of everything that would appear on it and every time that it has appeared before, like in notes or assignments or whatever, and then I culminate them into one source and one document. It usually takes me about 3 hours to make that final document, and I usually enjoy doing it like in a cafe or somewhere nice and quiet, so I can dedicate my time and focus. And usually, whenever it comes to studying, I find that the best way to keep it in my brain is just reproducing it over and over, or simplifying it as easy as I can, or finding some kind of reference that I can remember it with to make it a little easier to remember on a test.
Um, I kind of want to, I'm going to mention the last question, but in context of this question, one thing that really works in the classroom for me, um, is kind of that, I forget exactly how you worded it, but like the like, um, big lecture and then the guide on the side. Um, and I think that that component of teaching is really crucial to be able to get through to everyone. And I think for me, I'm pretty vocal if I don't understand something. Like I have kind of the confidence to raise my hand and say, "Hey, I don't get this." But I know that everyone's not like that, and not everyone is going to kind of speak up if they don't understand something. So I think making when professors make themselves a resource and really kind of put an effort into checking in on each student and asking for clarifications, I think that is super important. Um, and honestly, it in my experience, all of my favorite professors have that sort of style. But then, in terms of kind of like my own personal study, we talked about this in the pre Zoom call the earlier last week. Um, I am a real big component or proponent for like AI and being able to kind of harness and leverage that as a tool for learning instead of kind of just a get out of free homework card, I guess. And I actually I have a very quick demo of how it could be kind of utilized. I don't know if you want me to share my screen.
Yeah,
We can,
totally. How about this? Why don't we let Damien
yeah,
share his
mhm,
answer real quick and then we'll go to your demo. That
sounds
cool?
good.
Awesome.
For me personally, when it comes to my own studying, I can kind of get lost in class, especially if it's a long lecture and it's just kind of the professor talking and talking. After class, I go over my notes and I figure out what I properly digest, figure out what I can kind of branch off from and understand. And me personally, I'm a very like social person, so I don't have a problem reaching out to other people in my class, whether I'm friends with them or they're just someone I know who is not really confused on the subject. And then I cross-reference the knowledge that I think I've pertained and like got in my head. And from there, we kind of work on like with said person what I'm lacking in, and then if they're missing anything, it's kind of like a good balance system where we can check each other out and see what uh, we're both missing.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, it's so great to hear all of your reflections on, what works for you in the classroom and what you see as, really beneficial for your peers. And also some of these strategies that maybe not every, all students have of like after class really going over the notes and really making meaning out of what you did and, drawing out the key takeaways and that type of thing that you kind of are like, yeah, of course you do that, but not everyone comes in having learned how to learn effectively, how to study effectively. Someone might be banging their head against the wall for 5 hours studying, but they're just rereading the textbook and not actually, doing it in a way that's going to take it in. So I think that some of the work you're doing at the Success Studio is just so important, and we do hope to collaborate with you next semester on some more programming, maybe student-facing programming. Maybe you all could be involved in terms of how to effectively, learn more effectively, students for students. But in the meantime, we have this incredible new tool of AI, which can serve as a learning tools. I'd love to hear from Brad. Feel free to show us what it is that you do and how you use AI to help yourself learn.
Yeah, of course. So I have a very, very basic demo that I'll do. Obviously, you could get more in depth if because I don't really have a specific topic that I'm really going off of. But so this is the like recourse I'm using. This is one of the practice that's from physics, just physics one practice test. So today I was working on it, and on problem three, I just couldn't get it. I can go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, I have an exam tomorrow, and I am doing a practice test. I cannot figure out how to start long problem three. Can you show me the solution steps? Um, Show me the solution steps, and then just upload the file. This is not a feature that everyone has, the uploading the file. But regardless, you can just type the question in. But if I do that,
Is that because you have a paid version?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
Um, so it'll and then it immediately analyzes and it especially with physics, ChatGPT is very good with handling physics problems because it breaks it down kind of how a lot of professors will, where it shows you your givens and then shows you what you're looking for and then goes like very step by step showing the formulas you're using. So for part A, you're going to be using this formula. You have to convert it. So here's the conversion, and then you substitute in, and then it gives you the answers. And then same for the second part of it, where it shows you the formula, shows you plugging in the values, and then gives you the answer. And both of these are the correct answer. I made sure that it didn't give me some sort of wrong answer. But then, so that's kind of with problems. And then I can say, can you generate a similar problem for me to try on my, and it gives basically new numbers, new example, but it's the same concepts. And you can just keep, and then if I wanted to, I could ask for the solution to this one. So that's one way you can really use AI. And then the other is kind of creating study guides of sort. I have this prompt. This is, again, very, very simple. You'd probably want to go into more depth if you were really trying to study, but all I said is I have a physics exam coming up on these topics. Unit 1, motion, and then let me format this better. Unit 1, motion, units, vectors, 1D motion, 1D kinematics, 2D kinematics, circular motion, and then you create a comprehensive study guide with some practice problems for each topic. I run it, and then pretty quickly it will give me like a well formatted study guide where it breaks it down by each kind of topic. Obviously, if I was kind of doing this as a student, really trying to prepare, I would give it a little bit more information. So I might say something like, for units, we're doing dimensional analysis and like conversions. For vectors, I mean, it actually got vectors pretty well. I cannot lie. Maybe for kinematics, whatever is kind of more specific to you can tailor them specifically to what you're looking for. But regardless, AI is able to generate problems very well and like summarize information very well. So I think utilizing both of those tactics can improve a student's ability to study because it takes so much time away from learning, or it gives back so much time to learn instead of kind of compile resources.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that demo. Obviously, we have some physics and math instructors on the call, so it'll be really interesting to hear their perspectives when we get to have a bit more of a discussion. But of course, you could see how instructors could use this resource also to come up with like other ways to, can you teach us in a different way? Can you explain this in a different way, put it into different words, offer a different problem, for ways to kind of get creative with it as a kind of brainstorming partner. But as you alluded to, Brad, there's a fine line, between using this kind of as a tutor in a way that's going to help you advance your own thinking versus basically offloading your own cognition to this tool. So how do you, as you're using it, kind of tread that line so that you're not, you are actually using it to help improve your own thought process and deepen your skills rather than, just make it smoother and easier, and, not build those skills.
Yeah, I think for me, it is difficult to kind of walk that line between a resource and a like just a cheating tool, I guess. But I don't think there's another way to really effectively solve that problem without it just being on the student and kind of a matter of integrity. I think that for one, AI is not the only cheating resource. So if a student is going to cheat, they're going to cheat. I kind of strongly believe that. So I think that while AI does provide probably an easier outlet to cheat, if a student is really trying to learn, then using it as a tool is not difficult at all because the prompts aren't going to just give you it will give you what you tell it, what you input. So if you say just like generate a problem for me or solve this problem, then give me one to practice with. If you use it in a constructive way, then it will give you constructive results. But if you go into it and you with the intentions of using it to get your homework done in 5 minutes, it'll get your homework done in 5 minutes. So I think it really is on the student ultimately at the end of the day.
Yeah. Do any of our other student panelists have any thoughts you want to add to this brief kind of interlude into generative AI and learning?
Yeah, I definitely think Brad gives up a lot of good points, specifically about how AI should mostly be utilized with math-focused questions and things that the thing about AI is it's really good at explaining to you how you do things and why you do things, specifically ChatGPT, because it gives you proper reason as to what the steps are to complete a formula, a question, or whatever. But it's also almost like shooting yourself in the leg when you try to actually answer a question, because there are a lot of times where you just think, oh, I'll plug in the entire question and it'll automatically give me the response. There are a lot of times where the question just ends up being flat out wrong and it's not even like good enough to use because you don't you don't know at what point the AI went wrong in their explanation, but you just know they did because there are a lot of times where its answer is wrong from the official answer from the professor. So that's also a plight of AI where it doesn't know when it's wrong. So it's unfortunately the second best resource that we really have, and the only one above that are paid services like Chegg and different tutoring services that you can find online, because um, the average student is poor. If we're being frank, because it's really hard to afford like paid services these days, and everything is just jacking up its prices. So AI is the best solution for most people, and it's most economic. And it's unfortunate when a lot of times it ends up being wrong. And so the next best resource is us, in-person tutors. So whatever source of information that you could find, however you get it, um, desperation breeds success, I guess. And I've been desperate in math class a lot of times. So.
Hmm. Thank you so much for your honesty here. Certainly looking forward to hearing any questions or reflections from anyone else in the room at when we open up for further discussion. And just to think about like what are the reasons, obviously, why people might feel those ways and feel like they have to reach out to some source for additional help that might not be the best, like asking an AI tool to help do their homework versus going to the Success Studio where a tutor like yourself would empower them to with skills and with breaking down the assignment to be able to make them discover how to do it themselves. Uh, that'd be the better way. But one of those things is just anxiety, right? And this we're having a program more focused on that next week. But this question, it's been coming up a lot in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, the resources we've been looking at for this programming series this fall. So this next question kind of deals with that. It zooms out a little bit from the specificities of instructional practice in the classroom and just looking at this idea of connecting with Gen Z through course design. Beth McMurdy writes, we've been writing a lot lately about the challenges of reaching and teaching this generation of students. They're an anxious bunch who need more structure and incentives that many professors are accustomed to providing. So kind of a broad generalization, and it's a little bit bold, and you might take it personally and be having to take a back. I don't know, maybe you don't like it, maybe you agree with it. What have you seen here in your experience on this campus vis-a-vis this statement from this article from the Chronicle?
For me, I definitely agree with that sentiment. If I'm not like given clear instructions, I kind of freeze before doing an assignment, and that really like leads to me procrastinating and just like not wanting to go through the effort of like learning how to do the assignment and then doing the assignment after that, which like takes a whole lot more time than just doing the assignment. So if I had like a much clearer idea of what I was supposed to be doing, then I would start a lot earlier. Um, yeah.
Yeah, Angela brings up a good point. It's really hard to define where you should be starting with a lot of assignments. That structure is invaluable to a lot of people, and specifically some neurodivergent people. They might have a passion for this topic and they might really want to pursue it, but there are a lot of times where it's just overwhelming. And like, it doesn't matter who you are, we've all been overwhelmed at some point. And especially in an environment like this where there's a lot of pressure to succeed, it's more helpful than hurtful for a professor to get involved with their students and try and reach them on a personal level and try and structure their assignments that incentivizes them to learn from them instead of just um, putting in whatever grade will get them, whatever work will get in the best grade, and then spit it back out. It takes a certain amount of self realization and creativity to actually get that knowledge through your head, but then it also takes a certain amount of structure and aforementioned knowledge in order for those ideas to be correct and for them to be correctly implemented.
Um, I think that on the opposite side of thinking about uh, kind of having that anxious feeling of where to start an assignment, I think kind of a big thing with my generation, and this is also another broad generalization, is that our attention spans have severely kind of decreased. And on top of that, it does kind of become hard to pay attention in your classes when the class is more tailored in a lecture style where I'm not being engaged except to sit there, listen, and just take notes. So as I'm sitting there, if there are problems actively being asked on how to solve, and I actually have to be kind of in the way of having a stronger structure in the class where I have to be engaged, I have to be focused, and I'm actively doing things, I think that is something that a lot of students kind of now in this day and age need more of. That there is also this lack of where they kind of put over the lecturing and nonstop flow of information over the retention of the information.
Yeah, I agree kind of with all of the points. I don't really have any kind of new ideas to provide. I kind of agree with what everyone else was saying.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and thank you, Deirdre, for your question in the chat. So, yeah, all of the resources and the examples we're pulling are more anecdotal, and we can definitely meet another time and take a closer look at what those Chronicle reporters are drawing from. Maybe there is research we can pull in, but I think that's going to be outside the scope of this particular program. But I'd certainly be curious to look into that with you if you want to connect, and we can do
Oh,
that
no,
as
I can.
well.
I'm happy to do the Google Scholar search. I mean, these are large areas of research that people have dedicated their careers to. I was just curious if you had any that maybe folks on the call could see what the data says and what the research says. Thanks.
Yeah, that would be really interesting, and also be a great place for our collaborative notes document to throw in any other additional resources or other ideas or other sources. But Brad, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I saw that question pop up, and I did just a very quick Google search, and there's a few studies that are referenced. I can put it in the chat, but like Gen Z as a whole, one study found that 42% of Gen Z battles with depression and feelings of hopelessness, which is almost twice as high as Americans who are over 25 at 23%. Um, Another study released revealed that anxiety has reached an alarming level of 61%. And most of these anxieties revolve around future finances, work, social activities, and relationships. So I think it is definitely a fair assessment
Oh,
to
I'm not,
say
I'm
that.
not saying it's not a
No, no,
fair
no. I'm
assessment.
not. I'm not saying.
I just think it would be great to take a look at the research instead of an opinion piece. That's
Yeah,
all.
no. I wasn't like I wasn't getting like a. I wasn't trying to make conflict with a generational thing, but I just think that I think personally that it's very true that I think students, especially college students in our generation, a lot of people kind of have a sort of they don't know if their degree will really be meaningful. I think that's or they don't know to what degree compared to other generations that the work that they're putting in will pay out. And I think that you can kind of see that in a lot of the raised anxieties and
Yeah.
such.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that in. And please, if you're interested in this topic, come back next week for our programming on specifically anxiety and wellness and how to support students in that in the classroom, given the realities that Brad just brought in. And absolutely, Deirdre, this for this particular programming series, we were drawing more from quick resources that people could engage with more rapidly rather than bigger studies, but we'd be happy to look into that. And scholarship of teaching and learning continues to be a growing focus here at Wentworth. So if there are anyone is interested in conducting research on your own teaching practices in the classroom, we'd be happy to partner with you on that as well. But this definitely leads us really nicely into our next question, which is in the chat. In Reaching Generation Y, Ann Foster, history professor at Indiana State, writes, the most significant change I have made is to reveal much more about the why of my assignments, approaches, reading choices, even how I construct the course. I think Gen Z students do need more motivation in some ways, but I think that's not quite the right word. They want to know the purpose of things. They want to know the purpose of things. So that obviously ties right into what you were just saying, Brad. But let's hear from our panel again. Angela, start us off.
I can definitely understand like a student's frustration if they don't understand why they're doing something. Like if they were to know exactly how this would help them in like achieving their end goal of like learning more in the end and like working towards their like wanted profession, they would be much more willing to like invest a lot more of their time into that, especially if they're passionate about like what they wanted to achieve in the future.
Great.
Yeah, I can certainly say that I've been asking why for a lot of my classes for basically my entire life, or I'm wondering why am I sitting here and doing this? And I think Brad can attest this as well, since he's also a data science student. But a lot of my classes, I wasn't entirely sure why I was taking them, like discrete mathematics and linear algebra. I didn't know what purpose they had in my field until like I took those classes and my professors who were really passionate about it, they took the time to explain like not only the mechanics of this math, but why it's important for the industry and why it's important for basic concepts that you will continue for the rest of your working life. So there are a lot of times where my questions of why um, it's kind of a shame when they aren't really answered in class time, but if I care enough about it, I'll ask the professor why I need to after class, like why I need to learn these things, or like what I could do to better enhance my understanding with that professor about why it's important. Or if I understood it from the get-go why it's important, then I feel like it'd still be necessary to state why the topic is essential, because there are, so many things that a class like discrete math or like calculus could cover. And there's so many different things that could branch off to. Like calculus could branch off into physics, it could branch off into chemistry, it could branch off into so many different things. So understanding why it's fundamental is just as important as understanding the concept itself. So
Yeah, again, I don't really have anything to add. I think Angela and Marco kind of hit it on the head.
Thanks.
I would say that for the most part, I like completely agree with everything Angela and Marco had said. I think kind of like a food for thought kind of comment that I was thinking about, and we were discussing this question is we're kind of in an era now where memory retention isn't as needed as it has been for years prior. I mean, we quite literally have everything we could ever need at our fingertips. So that can kind of go into that idea of why do I need to learn this? Why do we need to spend hours remembering and learning how to do certain little things when I have the opportunity to go ahead and look something up at literally any given moment? So I think that can also be a very strong thing, which Marco kind of covered, where professors should kind of take that step forward and really put emphasis on this is why you should know how to execute this and know how to do this and how it's going to relate for my future career.
Great. Thank you so much. And just to bring back that idea of tilt, so we've seen the purpose over and over again, and that's how the tilt proposes assignments start the task with a lot of clarity, scaffolding broken down, and criteria. So that's just one straightforward instructional strategy that can be used, kind of bringing in some of these things that we've been talking about. We have one more question. I want to run through it really quickly. So maybe give us your like very quick take on it. And then I want to open things up to our audience to be able to share your thoughts, ask your questions, and have a bit more of a conversation. So our last question is in Reaching Generation Y. Carrie O'Grady writes, with this generation, the more leadership you give them, the more they feel in control of their education. And is, alluding to that's a good thing. So what is your take on that? Angela, take it away.
This is kind of like a whole 180 of what we've been talking about this entire time. Like instead of supporting your students, you're kind of like letting them go off on their own, which like I can go both ways on this. Obviously a great balance right in between would be the best option, like giving them a guide, like a layout, a little organization that they can follow, but then letting them explore their own ways of like completing assignments and stuff like that is wonderful, especially when you're in like the professional field, you don't really have much like organization and you kind of have to do things by yourself. And then like having students experience that in college well before they're in the professional field is a great way to like give them a head start on that.
Yeah, I like to think of it in terms of like a metaphor where it's like you're leading a herd of sheep. Well, not sheep. It's kind of insensitive, but like you're leading a group, and there are a lot of times where a professor they try to hold on to the rope too tight, and they're making the students do assignment after assignment, and it's just so much work, and they're just trying to pound in the concepts over and over and over again, and it's really hard for a student to worry about them retaining the information and getting a good grade at the same time. On the polar opposite, you have the professor who has letting the leash go, and they are not really guiding the student at all. They're kind of expecting them to just eat up the resources that they give them and expect them to read everything online by themselves. In which case, that's the other part where students are unclear about what they're learning in the first place, and one might call it overfitting and underfitting because you're overfitting how much you're teaching the students and then you're underfitting how much you're fitting the students. So there's this perfect delicate balance where you have to make the student feel like they're the ones that are actually holding the rope, where they feel like they're the ones that are in control of their own learning. And if a student is going to go on and be passionate about their career and decide to pursue it for years to come, they need to know that they lead themselves in at least some aspect because um, the core lessons that they learn, everything is foundational, and like we said before. So if they didn't learn it properly, it's just what feels like a wash to them. So just tread a little lightly. That get that mid region, that comfortable rope holding region.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one thing where it's like kind of how can you give a student more independence without kind of sacrificing like retention of information. I think specifically for like my experience as a data science student, one thing that I really like is kind of like allowing a student's creativity to like become part of the assignment. So like when I get a project where it's like specifically this data set and analyze this, it feels a lot more kind of tedious and I'm not as connected to it compared to an assignment where it's you pick the data set and do some sort of analysis on it, where there's certain guidelines to follow, where you're still kind of getting that information through, but then there's kind of that personal attachment to the work where you can kind of do something that you want to do. So I think allowing creativity to kind of be a part of assignments it kind of helps that.
I think I kind of took the question just in a slightly different take, where it's not necessarily about letting the student have complete leadership of the like coursework in a way, whereas the way I kind of perceived it is kind of how I answered the previous question, where it was about having student engagement in the class compared to just being lectured at, giving the students opportunity to speak up, be present, allow to actually put in their input and put in their effort. And I think that kind of creates that separation of something that was mentioned prior about having the kind of course that just makes you submit assignments just to pass the class compared to having assignments that let the students foster their abilities and not just be so worried about, oh, I just need to turn this in to get an A, but rather let me take the time to learn, process, and create something wonderful with what I've just learned.
Wow, thank you all so much for sharing your experience and expertise, both as students here at Wentworth and also teachers. You're, tutors, and you help empower your peers to learn in so many ways. I know we're almost at time, but I'd love to open up the floor to anyone in our audience to share any thoughts you have, any questions you have, as we have this really amazing opportunity to hear from our students as to what their perspectives are with teaching and learning here at Wentworth. So the floor is open if you want to jump in, either in the chat or come off mute and share anything. Well, thank you all for being here. And whether or not you're, feel like saying anything now, feel free to find me or reach out to me or Tom, and we'd love to hear your perspectives on how this went, what this was like for you. If you want more of it, I thought it was really, really cool, very interesting and very enriching discussion. And I just want to give big thanks to our four peer tutors for joining us, for giving this so much thought. I mean, you obviously put so much thought into all of the questions and the answers, and we're really honest and forthright with your perspective. So really appreciate that. And yeah, right before we wrap up, is there anything else anyone wants to say? Share? Tom, is there anything you want to say as we wrap up?
No, I just thanks everyone for coming, and thanks again to the tutors. It's beyond the expectations for the role, so I really appreciate you all putting the time in for this to offer your perspective from kind of seeing it from both sides, both helping people learn and also learning yourself. I think as a faculty staff, it's really interesting to get that perspective. So really appreciate it.
Definitely. Everyone, have a wonderful afternoon, and please reach out. We'd love to keep the conversation going. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.